to you. Maybe formatting of the presentation is different. So I understand that this is the course is for mostly the faculties of the engineering colleges. And that's what I understand.
All of the candidates from engineering and industry, sir.
Okay, so how many participants are there right now?
Sir, 96 right now. 96.
96. Are there students also?
Research scholars and faculties and industry person.
Industry person. Okay. I will try. I'm sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but last night only I reached from a site, and today morning I knew you will be busy. So anyway, good morning to all the friends who are present in this online course of FDP. This is, I was looking at the contents you have covered quite nicely, that it is non-destructive testing and evaluation. And almost many of the techniques, whether it is stress management, eddy current, and modeling or ultrasonic, infrared, all have been covered. So, and it is perhaps the last lecture of your course. So I feel that you are already knowledgeable about many of the things. So I will not try to speak on those subjects which you have already, those topics which you have already, exposed in detail in a mathematical form or in how to use the equipments. So, but what I will try to give you during this 1 hour talk is the kind of problems that we face and we try to solve, and we use a non-destructive evaluation as a tool to solve some of the engineering challenges. So that is part one. And secondly, we will also try to tell you some of the activities what we have done in this institute for the preservation and conservation of the heritage structures. And in the end, we will cover some of the case studies which you might find interesting, where we have used NDT to supplement our decisions for supporting, conserving these structures and trying to find out the distress locations and things like that. So once I start, please see if we don't. I think the slide is changing. Please, someone can confirm.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It is changing. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I will start that. We all know India is a land of heritage structures. We have a very rich legacy and history. So Government of India started a project on 21st January 2015 known as Hridaya Yojana, and this was main focus on conservation of monuments and temples. Then there are many schemes from Government of India which are running from the conservation of heritage structures as such. You will be, happy to note that UNESCO World Heritage Sites in India, there are total 35. It has increased now to 36 because 3 days back Ramappa Temple has already also been added in this list. And many of the, and this is not the all, Archaeological Survey of India has more than 3,700 sites. But other than these, there are state archaeological departments. I am sure J&K must be having their own hundreds of structures and buildings and sites to conserve. Similarly, departments like railways, PWDs of the state government, and many of the temples, shrines, mosques which are under private control are also our heritage, and a lot is to be done because we want to preserve and conserve this heritage for many times to come. So as a engineer, as a scientist in Central Building Research Institute, we get certain opportunities that we need to investigate and serve. In this slide, we are trying to show that CSR CBRI has directly or indirectly contributed to conservation and restoration. And I have not written, but it is their troubleshooting, which many a times engineers are being asked. We have, although structural engineers, geotechnical engineers, material expert, environmentalist, and other fire experts available with us in our institute at CBRI Roorkee, which is in Uttarakhand. And the work which I am going to present is not only of my own. This is a teamwork. We have a few very young scientists also working in many of the areas. So the problems that we have handled, which are many more, but to exemplify for some of the monuments that you know, ancient monuments, Taj Mahal, Sun Temple, Konark, Jagannath Puri, Chittorgarh Fort, Qutub Minar, these have been handled by our institute. For some of the projects, I was the project leader, while some were done by one or two other of my colleagues. So we'll not go into these details, but there are not only old structures, there are comparatively new structures also. Comparatively new means maybe 100 years, 200 years old. So, or 300 years old. So we get Kashi Vishwanath Mandir, Forest Research Institute building, Dehradun, UP Vidhan Sabha, Lucknow, National Archive of India building, Amer Fort, Jaipur, Rashtrapati Bhavan, New Delhi, Jagannath Temple, Puri, again, it's an ongoing project for us. And Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus building in Mumbai also it's also a World Heritage building. We are also contributing to the railways, working with them for the conservation and preservation of these kinds of buildings. So overall, why there is a need to study on heritage buildings? It is similar to like why we need to study all modern buildings. But at the same time, believe me, friends, study of heritage buildings is much more difficult than normal RCC and masonry and what do you call steel buildings, because they are all codified. We know all the codes are available, detailed codes are available, but this is very challenging that we are having to study the heritage buildings. The need arises because these buildings are subjected to extreme loadings. These structures are disjointed. They are not like RCC or the continuity. Mostly they are disjointed. Material is degraded. So you know the fresh material after 500 years, the material property might have changed. So you have to assess it. Material degradation issues. There are existing technique which are existing may not be appropriate. There are very limited studies to scientifically preserve these structures. Sometimes we are not very much sure what has been used. So whatever is our current knowledge, we try to use based on that. But a lot of scientific inputs are required, and they have increased in the country, our country, and even internationally, people are very much concerned. The protocol which is available by the archaeologists and historians, primarily they are either historians or architects, maybe a few engineers, but the protocol available is only on conservation. Many a times there is no record for the structural system and no record of the repairs which have been done in the past. So what we need innovative material and techniques to restore the structural stability and integrity if it is endangered, and we we feel that it is endangered, I would like to bring your attention to a point of digital preservation is required. Now, this is a very important area because many of the, in spite of best of our efforts or the effort of the country's custodians, we should digitally preserve our heritage for two reasons. One is we can use the technology of virtual reality and other things so that people can access these from a distance location. And when they reach there with the imaging techniques and softwares, they can know about the structure more in detail or the site in more detail. For that also digital preservation is required. And sometime because of any calamity, earthquake, disaster, or bombing, like it has been done for the Bamiyan Buddha statues. Now we don't have any more available with us. So digital preservation of these heritage structures is also a need. We also need advanced non-destructive evaluations, like and mostly advanced and hybrid. Because whatever we are using right now has been primarily developed these techniques for RCC and for steel structures. So we are trying to use similar techniques for heritage structures. So, but here the need is we have to combine the results because one type of entity may not be sufficient for solving, as I already told you, the most challenging task in the heritage structures. So that is also needed. And strategies for disaster mitigation is also required for the heritage structures. This is overall picture what I'm trying to do. When we come to the domain of research in heritage structures, we have taken a mission mode project, which is now over. The first phase, second phase may start soon, where we have done classification and categorization. Because when we study worldwide, the classification of heritage structure is also not to the mark as per what engineers and material scientists would have loved to. It is basically classified from tourist point of view, which is fair enough, but we wanted more information from structure and engineering and materials and architecture point of view should be there. Digitization and 3D mapping, structural analysis, distress diagnosis and remedies, hybrid non-destructive testing, environmental effects or impacts, material development and restoration techniques. This is also very, very important because we need to develop some materials which are compatible but as well as better than what has been used. So compatibility is an issue, and we have to many times struggle to convince the archaeologists to use any new material because that is not allowed on the monuments. But for heritage buildings, we are allowed. So let me also try to distinguish between monuments and heritage buildings. Heritage can be your own ancestral house for you, and monuments are the designated monuments which are designated under the Act by the Archaeological Survey of India or state archaeology. So they are monuments, but we need to preserve many of our heritage and what we want that it should be done. Now coming to the NDT, I am very, very sure that you are all aware of all this technique which my colleagues are working, but for the sake of completeness of the talk, I will quickly go through some of the techniques which we are using. You all know it is a non-invasive technique to determine the integrity of the material and component or structure. It is quantitatively measure some characteristics of an object and diagnosis without doing harm and damage to the material. That is why non-destructive evaluation is most advanced or most rapidly increasing field of research all over the world, because many a times you are not allowed to touch and you have to get certain information and in a quantifiable manner. We are good in getting qualitative information, but quantification of the information is important. All civil engineers and mechanical engineers and all these people, they use many of these equipments. So deliverables of the entity can be many things. I'm sure you all must be knowing. You can know the elastic modulus. We may try to divide density, strength, reinforcement location, cracks and voids, quality of workmanship, surface absorption, surface hardness. Most important, most common tool is rebound hammer, which measures the surface hardness, and we try to correlate the results with the help of the predefined, data set, that what could be the probable strength. As I was discussing with you, challenges with heritage structures are more. I have listed a few. Exact layout plan, section, material, and density are mostly not available. There may be some drawings available, but they are many times not available. There are huge thickness, because what we are working in our normal buildings, the thickness is less than a meter. But when you go for these kind of structures, there may be thickness may be mostly more than a meter, and many a times it can be 6-7 meters. There is a very limited opportunity. Nobody will allow you to touch, alter, take samples, take cores from the material. So it becomes a challenge how to ascertain the properties. Defects. There may be defects with the time available in the structure, and they may be very close to the surface, or they may be very deep because there is a thickness. Suppose a defect is 1.5 meter deep, what will you do? So that is why we can use, where we can use NDT, we can use fraud detection, leak seepage, structure, microstructure characterization to some extent, estimation of mechanical and physical properties to some extent, stress and dynamic response measurement, material sorting and chemical composition. My colleague says, I don't know how he will do it. So what are the common techniques of NDT? And please see that I have kept visual inspection at the top in different color, because I feel this is one of the most important technique. An experienced eye. Borescope, rebound hammer, flat jack, parallel seismic, half cell potential, magnetic pulse induction, X-ray tomography, infrared, impact echo, ultrasonic, GPR. There are many equipments available, and people take time to develop the understanding and expertise of this kind of to understand. You can get a data, but sometime to interpret that data becomes very difficult, and I have seen my colleagues struggling and scratching their head how to conclude a useful information after doing NDT. That is also we all must keep in mind. But let us see. There are some IS codes on NDT, but this is mostly on civil structures, and there may be others which I do not know, because basically I am a civil engineer. So visual inspection. Friends, visual inspection is experience in a well-trained eye. Once you have done your work, maybe 15 years, 20 years, or 30 years, you get to notice some of the cracks, some of the issues which you can by settlement, by degradation, which you can itself tell. Maybe you don't require any testing that this is going to be under difficult situation in time to come, and this is experienced and well trained eye. You can say you can visualize cracks, pop outs, spallings, disintegration, color change, weathering, staining, surface blemishes, lack of uniformity. Many things you can know only by eye judgment or visual inspection. So this is one of the very important first step for carrying out any NDT, what we do. Even we have very, very small tools. These are also NDT tools. Measuring tape, ruler, marker, thermometer, and anemometers. In case you are not able to access some of the very high or inaccessible locations, we use binoculars, telescope, endoscopies. I have done. I will show you one example of endoscopy in the case study part. And we are also starting to use now drones to study the inaccessible locations, higher monuments where you cannot climb. It is very difficult. So we are trying to develop the technique of using drones with digital camera and other equipments installed on it, so that a non-contact NDT can be performed. So my colleagues are working on this. So the methodology that we adopt for heritage structures mostly study designs that are available, preliminary survey, and then detailed visual inspection, assessment of environmental condition, and then we try to form what is all needs to be done, whether more NDT is required, whether structural analysis is required, whether all other kinds of NDTs are required. We decide based on this. Damage observed in visual observation, I've already covered. Even humidity, capillary action, water filtration, fissures. Sometimes many a times you can locate through visual inspection only. Rebound hammer, I'm sure you all must be knowing. I will not put my time on this. This is basically for concrete, but it can be used for stones also. And calibrations are to be done. If you are not sure which stone is it, then for a large structure, it is a very simple process. You have to take one stone, calibrate it, and then you can use it on similar stone with different energy rebound hammers. Not that N-type rebound hammer can be used everywhere. It cannot be used. So there are high energy hammers. So maybe 30 to 70 MPa, 70 to 100 MPa, and more than 100 MPa. Then we can use this kind of hammers, and we can use for lesser strength 1 to 5 MPa or 5 to 10 MPa. We can use this is a typical graph from Smith Hammer, which is one of the leading hammer manufacturing company. They say that even for masonry strength you can use it. A low strength. I'm talking masonry means brick masonry, not a very thick stone masonry. Now, pulse velocity method, primarily there are two types. We use ultrasonics and mechanical pulse velocity methods. Mostly ultrasonics. I have seen the lecture list now that it is covered more than 20 kilohertz frequencies. They come under ultrasonics. You are aware of these slides and ultrasonics. Example is sonar also, which is used in the lakes and seas. Geophysics also used, medical equipments also being used, and we use for civil structures. And I'm sure for mechanical also, people must be using these techniques. Objective of ultrasonic is to find out the homogeneity of the material, presence of the cracks, voids, and other imperfections, which is very much required even in steel when they make steel or any components of the cars. It can be used. I am sure they must be using the leading car manufacturers. Quality of material related to standard requirement can also be tested through this, and various information you can get. We all know ultrasonic wave travel in a particular path until they encounter a surface, and at the surface interface, some of the wave energy is reflected and some is transmitted. The travel time of the sound provides information about the depth of the scatter, and different modes of data collected can be carried out through pulse deco, through transmissions, etc. That they are correlated with the ultrasonic parameters. Frequency is the governing parameter for the depth of penetration for the ultrasonic waves. This is the apparatus. You all know there is the electrical pulse generator, transmitter, receiver, amplifier, and electronic mode. There are a ultrasonic generation in solid principles. They are principle. I'm sure in detailed lecture, because there are 2 lectures on ultrasonic. This must have been covered, so I will not go into this. But in civil engineering as such, we use these 3 methods many a times. Direct method, which is mostly preferred and used and most reliable. Semi-direct and indirect method of testing also being used. This is our laboratory picture where we are using ultrasonics to visualize the defects available in a concrete, and we are trying to visualize it through ultrasonic waves, the delaminations. We have already developed this technology, and we have already marketed this, or you can say handholded one of the Indian MSME who is now going to produce these new kind of ultrasonic equipments by which you can see some of the defects, not only so that it becomes easier for the engineers at site or at the factory to locate the delamination without knowing too much of the science of the scan and the processing of the data of the UPV results, so we can see the defects through that equipment. There are many factors which affect the ultrasonics, which is the smoothness or the contact surface under test, because it is a contact method. And that is why I said, when there is a heritage structures, many a time there are carvings. So it becomes very, very difficult for us to perform ultrasonic test. Influence of path length, temperature of a specimen, moisture condition, presence of reinforcing steel, all these things may affect the ultrasonic results. Then similarly, we have a mechanical impact echo method, which uses impact. I have not seen somebody covering impact echo in this. I will just take 2 minutes in this. It uses impact generated stress wave that propagate through the medium. As you can see, the wave propagates through the surface, assuming it to be a homogeneous wave, and reflects back from the bottom of the, say, a slab or a beam or a stone. But suppose there is a void, so the wave will reflect back from this area and you get the different waveform. Okay. For masonry, it can determine the thickness and location of crack also, and not adversely affecting the presence of steel reinforcement. That is the advantage. I will like to show you this slide. Please see these 4 figures, which will give the theoretically, if there is an impact source and there is a receiver and it's a perfect sample of stone or concrete. You will get one peak, the frequency domain, okay, in kilohertz has been plotted. Suppose it has some sort of delamination or a anomaly present, then some waves will go to the deeper, but some wave will come from the lesser height. It is taken an ideal case. So you will get two peaks in your impact echo results. But if it is a perfect delamination, pakka cracked in between, then you will get a shift in the peak, which you can see at the left bottom. But if the deterioration is so much, okay, then you don't get a peak, rather you get a declining curve. So this means this condition is very, very serious of the, say, example, concrete. So this equipment is used. I will not say this will qualify under non-destructive testing, but this is a tool which we use in the masonry structures, which you can call it semi-destructive or something like this. What we do, it's called flat jack. A flat jack testing equipment consists of flexible steel envelope, which is very thin and fits within the masonry mortar joint. And this flat jack is hydraulically pressurized to apply stress, and across the crack we measure the elongation and contraction, means stress and strains are measured. So you must be understanding by now. We try to find out the E value of the masonry using this equipment many a times. Boroscope method is there. People use a boroscope to look inside the inaccessible or very small voids. It's a very important equipment. I do not know whether somebody has covered GPR, but must be covered because there are no NDT techniques. So we use GPRs. Actually, it is ground penetrating radar, and we are using it for ground, plus we are also using it for the structures. We change the different antennas, and different frequencies antennas can be used. Higher the frequency, lower the depth, and higher the resolution you can get. We are very sure that with very high frequency antenna, you can even find out a defect as small as a thickness of a blade. But with the lower frequency set, you can go up to say 40 to 80 meters, so that you can know the ground undulations where you are building a structure or anomalies present. So this is our laboratory, and as I told you, we are these young boys are carrying out experiment using GPR, and on the right side you can see the test setup where GPR has been used, and we are trying to visualize this GPR, the reinforcement in this. As I also told, the equipment was primarily developed for geophysical explorations, but it is finding many use in structural application, and I'm sure in other branches of engineering and interest people must be having. In Roorkee, there is a Solani aqueduct, which is maybe 100, nearly 75 years old. Britishers made it, and we have this is a heritage structure. We have used our GPR there, and we tried to find out pavement layers in this, arch locations which were otherwise not visible. We have also tried to find out some of the cross sections using GPR, and we have also tried to reconstruct using tools, modeling tools, the geometry, what could be there without actually measuring it. There is one more equipment which we are using. It is called electrical resistivity tomography or electrical resistivity imaging. It is also a geophysical technique for imaging subsurface structures from electrical resistivity measures made at the surface or by electrodes in one or more of the boreholes. Means you can use it. The figure shows is on the surface. You lay down the cable on a stretch and try to take the electrical resistivity data from the depth. Right now, our team is working in one of the wagon tippler plant in Bihar, where there is a underground tunnel of the wagon tippler, and we are trying. They have done the grouting because of the to check the settlement of the wagon tippler structure and tunnel. And my team is trying to find out what is the efficacy of the grouting. And it's a new way to use ERT method for finding the cross section, and 3D pictures can be created below the ground, and appropriate decisions can be taken by engineers and administrators about the quality. So this is general resistivity. You straight the cable, send a source, pick it up at many locations, and it's very fast method. Okay. This kind of data about the interpreted soil bedrock interface you can get from the ERT method. But again, as I told you in the beginning, interpretation of data is very, very important, and it needs a lot of patience and expertise and time. Then people can use it. I understand there were 2 lectures about thermography. So you all know that we use passive thermography and active thermography. Moisture penetration, plumbing to test the effectiveness of curing, we can use it. Detection of voids can be done through active thermography because you have to raise the temperature of the structure. Roorkee, where I stay, the place is known for this lawn, and this is under dilapidated condition. From visual eye, you cannot see, but from the thermography picture, you can have another signature. This is another example of the Solani aqueduct thermography. Many places water accumulation can be seen through seepage. So we are requesting the government to take care of this. There are other examples of the passive thermography in UP irrigation workshop. I told you that we were working for the FRI Dehradun building. This is an aerial shot. These magnificent buildings, many film shootings have been done. You can see in these corridors and in the lawns of this, and this has gone under distress. There are structural distress, there are material issues, but what I am covering here is not the structure and the material, but I am trying to show that we have used thermography to identify the seepage and leakage because that was affecting the building. You can see in the pictures that has been used. Again, at CSMT Mumbai building also, because many of the locations were very difficult to climb and see, we use thermography. UP irrigation already have shown. I would like to show you the active thermography type of experiment that we are doing in our laboratory, where we are again trying to find out the anomalies and crack detection by hitting the object through lens and then trying to take cam pictures. My colleagues are doing experimental when they are making open specimen and they're trying to measure 24 hours at the time of day. What is the best time to take thermography results? Also, they are going to publish this. This is our again laboratory setup, how they are trying to detect the defects due to active thermography in this area. I'm now like to discuss with you a few of the case studies. I will not say that these are case studies where entity is of paramount importance. The importance is we are exposed to a problem and we use many our visual inspection technique and other things, structural analysis, and try to provide some sort of solution if possible. So the first study I will share very briefly about the Taj Mahal because everybody knows. So I thought this will be interesting to many of the participants. So the problem given to us was that you have to tell us what is the foundation, what is the condition. There is a nearby Yamuna river and water is receding. Sometimes there is a flood. So means there is a fluctuation of water. What will happen to Taj Mahal? So we did this study 9 years back, not very recent. So to study the effect of Yamuna water on Taj Mahal, we did GPR, we did 3D laser scanning. You can see in this picture a guy doing 3D laser scanning. We have digital preserved data of the Taj Mahal. It's such an important monument of our country. We have given this data to Archaeological Survey of India. The project was sponsored by them. We did visual inspection and other structural analysis, which I will quickly come to you. We had carried out some borehole studies all around Taj Mahal because Taj Mahal you can't touch. So we found out there is a clay layer at 25 meter, water table at 4 meter. These are all civil engineering related issues. If I am boring you, please excuse me. In the bottom figure, I am sorry for this poor quality, but this is the plan is of Taj Mahal. And these black dots, if you can see on your screen, I'm not very sure. These are the borehole locations by which we try to find out what is the soil condition. And it is important for our geotechnical engineers to assess the kind of safe bearing capacity, the type of settlement any structure made on this can go. And you can see the Yamuna river has been shown by this in black color. So that foundation settlement analysis was done and it was seen that total settlement of cohesive layer 1.6 meter is assumed, and based on the subsoil profile we had concluded that 99.6% of the anticipated settlement has already taken place. So future settlement, if any, would be insignificant. Meaning by we can say that foundation of the monument in the state of submergence because water table is at 4 meter. So and any impounding water in the river will not make any difference to the situation. These are the conclusions which were made. But regarding the GPR study, the data has been collected by 50, 100, 250, 500 and 1000 megahertz antenna frequencies. You can see in the left bottom a figure where the actual cover is there below the, can you see the staircase? Normally people are not allowed to go there. So we are trying to locate through GPR by to some depth what is there, if we can get some signatures. And this is the outside boundary of the Taj Mahal. There also we did 3D laser scanning. As I was telling, in digital preservation it plays an important role. It sends the laser beam, collects the 3D geometry. One can refer it through the global positioning system, and a reference drawing can be made on the earth. And this is the kind of some sample we have done. But what we have done through laser scanning, we created 3D mesh models of the Taj Mahal, did the structural analysis, which may not be very much interest to you. We did ANSYS. I understand mechanical engineers also use a lot ANSYS. So ANSYS has been used, and we tried to model this Taj Mahal and try to find out what is the stresses. Luckily, we are all safe. Another example which I will like to cover is about Sun Temple, Konark. which is one of the very important old monument at the sea coast of Odisha, very near to the sea coast. If for the benefit of the participants, I may tell you, what you are seeing on your screen is a structure which has 3 tier, which is called Pidhas in Odishan architecture, and then Amlakha at the top. This is very, you can see the height of the people who are walking on the platform. You can judge the height of this structure. And I will also like to see you notice this, the kind of support and a mesh of the steel grillage has been provided here for this temple, which obviously doesn't look nice for this temple. This Sun Temple Konark, people go to watch the magnificent and this wheeled chariot of sun god. And then this structure, there was a larger structure behind this which fell on this. So the Britishers at that time in around 1903 repaired this, sealed it and filled it with sand. This structure is filled with sand. So the problem came into us is, please tell whether the sand can be removed. What is the condition of the Sun Temple Konark? Can we make a good arrangement, because these cantilevers pidhas are of the length of maybe up to 1 meter to 1.5 meter. So there are some chances that these very old structures, these may fall. So they were supporting this. So we investigated this, CBRI. 2 years back, we gave our report and we conducted GPR survey. We conducted GPR on the walls of the Sun Temple. I'm sorry for this small figure. Documentation of the Jagmona by laser scanning, accessing internal condition of the Jagmona by endoscopy, and exploring the possibility of the removal of the sand. And you see endoscopy, we have done different type of equipments, endoscopy of a rigid or flexible tube, a light delivery system to illuminate the object. It is used in piping system in industries, but we have to use endoscoping using HTC. These my colleagues are sitting on the top of the temple at around say 30 meter or more. And I will show you this figure which was taken in February 2017. Inside, as the sand you can see, this you can imagine you are seeing from the top, and inside the stone cladding which was made, dry stone masonry is falling. So this was done without puncturing into the wall of the temple and a kind of endoscopy. Although equipment used was a camera and a high light, a 3D camera. We have done this study of this is about the structure, laser scanning data. Again, we tried to analyze that because of the sand, what could be pressures if you fill it with completely, what will be the factor of safety. Then we calculated, okay, the present depths of the, as per drawing of the present thickness of the wall are safe. We monitored even visual inspection through rulers, laser displacement meter. Every stone has been mapped. Can you see this picture? So much of steel is there, people don't enjoy the beauty. I will show you now. We have suggested them that you make some sort of arrangement which is very sleek, which can be camouflaged with the architecture of the temple, and the visitors can enjoy this. Removing that thing. Now ASI has designed this, fabricated this, and are supporting these structures like this, rather than a full jungle of steel pipes. And for the, these stones to falling the stones, this a horizontal member is there and two vertical members, and very light sections have been designed. Then there is a recent project of Mahakaleshwar Mandir Ujjain. There also, I think I'm finishing up with the time. Mahakaleshwar Mandir Ujjain, we did NDT using infrared thermography and GPR, and we have submitted our report to the Supreme Court of India because they were worried about this. Thank you very much for the patient hearing.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving this informative talk.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure. You must be studying a lot about NDT. So I didn't touch most of the NDT, but I tried to show the participant some of the examples where it can be used. But engineers can take their many of the innovative ideas and use the NDT knowledge to many of the places where they feel like. So any comments, suggestions, questions?
Participants can ask the queries if they have. Participants can ask the queries.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce and ask.
Sir, I'm Purnima. I'm calling from ISRO, Bangalore.
You are from Bangalore, okay?
Sir, any study on Qutub Minar for its material? I understand it's not rusted till date like that. When we visit
Qutub Minar pillar, you are talking the metallurgy? No, we have not done it. But I think there are a lot of literature available on YouTube and other places. CBRI did Qutub Minar study because my colleague did. They were worried about the airplanes passing near to Qutub Minar, whether the vibrations of the noise wave will affect the integrity of the Qutub Minar. That was the idea. So we have done no study on the metallurgy part or the pillar, the Ashokan pillar, what they call it doesn't rust. We have no idea about it.